All right, welcome back to Mixed Messages. We have my son here today, Michael Burr. Let's get started.
Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you.
Stoked to have you here. So, Michael Burr, you have been someone that people have seen through my eyes, who are the current audience. Many of my audience members at the moment have grown up with me, know me as a person. They've seen pictures of you. They've never met you.
Well, I guess this is another way of somewhat seeing something about me.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
I do too. We got to spend Christmas together this year. What was your Christmas like?
I had a really good Christmas. I think for me, as well as a lot of us, it was definitely different in terms of, I think a lot of people were a little bit more enlightened to what's important, like family time. I feel like it wasn't as materialistic. At least for me, I know that I did get a couple really amazing gifts, but I didn't really get, a lot in monetary value. And that's entirely a good thing, And I think that's one of the things is when you get put in a place where maybe you can't afford the full monetary stuff or, you can't afford what you normally can, you do get put into a place where you do have to focus on other avenues of how do you make this a great Christmas? How do you make this an amazing Christmas? And I think I did feel a little bit more emotional value from this Christmas from, believe it or not, the lack of presents. I had a great Christmas.
Yeah, right. I know it was kind of like a St. Nick's tree, right? It was like, like everybody had like their three presents, right? It wasn't like like you didn't come into the house and be like, oh, there's 50,000 presents and we all get to just rip paper open and have everything we ever wanted, right? It was definitely, It was more humble. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I felt that too. I felt like there was an opportunity there. And I think the whole year has presented us all with like a bunch of challenges. Just on that note, what's 2020 feel like for you? You didn't get your graduation. You're part of the 2020 club who didn't really get to go to your graduation ceremony.
That's right.
You had to do remote learning in your first year of college. That's a thing now, right? There's like a whole generation where, some of you just came out of high school into college during 2020 in the most bizarre way ever. What was it like for you?
Well, I think one side is because it is such a big thing. When you normally go throughout high school or you go throughout school or you go throughout life, it's a very consecutive event, right? It's a very consecutive multitude of events. And this being the magnitude that it was, there's been this creation of an idea of pre-COVID and post-COVID, where you don't remember senior year so much as every part of senior year. You're not really, at least under my impression or how it is for me, my perspective, I don't really see senior year in particular, I should say, as this is what happened in...
Like the Letterman jacket, like everybody did homecoming prom. We all got to like live like a movie scene of high school year.
Right, what I mean by that is you don't see it in the light of what happened, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, because of COVID, I feel like a lot of us are so past high school that, you almost get no impression of it.
Wow.
Because everything gets masked by pre-COVID and post-COVID.
Wow.
And that's what I mean to say is that it's actually not as big of a deal to not have the same graduation, to not have the same ceremony, to not have a lot of the things, because a lot of people that are older will bring that up. Like, you didn't have this, you didn't have that. And I feel like a lot of us don't look at it in that way anymore. You just kind of know the pre-COVID stuff, the post-COVID, or at least post-beginning of COVID. You can't really say...
Wow, right. Like, it's so much bigger than that is what you're saying. Like, I mean, like, forget the ceremony. I mean, like, the world had a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
And at least for me, I guess, and a lot of us, it gets to a point where you get so past, the magnitude is so much bigger than any kind of wearing a piece of clothing and walking up a stage, regardless of how meaningful that's been for so many people.
Man, that says it. I feel that right now. I mean, I hadn't even thought about that until you just brought it up, but like, I really didn't need to wear the blue robe, and have a day where everybody took their pictures. Like, we are in the world that is much different. Pre-COVID, post-COVID is what you're saying. Wow. Thanks for bringing that to our attention on that one. And we kind of laughed and talked a little bit about this kind of like duality that's going on between boomers, as you guys call it, or I don't want to say you guys, but as a generation is calling it, and the new generation, which is you are generation?
Gen Z is what I'm a part of. Yes.
Exactly, right? And I've got some, super LinkedIn mentors of my own who are like, the world is going to really get handled by Gen Z. But, there's a big kind of discrepancy here right now that many people think you guys are just like flakes and don't give a shit about life and don't have a work ethic and sit around and expect everything to be given to you. Am I correct on this? Or do you feel like this? Or, I mean, separate from pandemic, right? Because we've all been pandemic to death, right? So I could totally go into that, but I think that was a really awesome way to start the show. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Right. But now if we just kind of move the meter a little bit and talk now about this kind of generational discrepancy about, are you guys really living into your fullest potential? Are you a worthwhile generation? Are you going to mess it all up? Do you even give a shit? And then you're saying, you've talked to me many times. I was glad to clarify that I'm Gen X, not a boomer tonight. So that you're like, hey, your generation just like totally fucked your lives over and picked bad jobs and you took money for it and sold your souls, right? But like, I'm like, well, no, Gen X isn't quite like that. We have a different little version of it. But the boomer thing's a real thing. Is that true? Michelle just told me that there's terminology.
Well, I think I would first start out by the impression of boomer. For me, it's not so much about the generational name. It's not so much that they're baby boomers. It's the first time we've kind of had a response to a generation that feels that they've achieved full success and that other ages don't account to that. Because sometimes I look at it and it's like, okay, you have this $400,000, you have all these riches, you're in this high place in society. And I think to myself, 401k, you know what I'm saying? 401k, it's not a meter of success. There is a meter of success naturally, but most older people will have more money because they've had more time. And that doesn't undermine any sort of generation. But a lot of us, especially in retail and food industry, and Gen X will agree, a lot of boomers or this older population, it's so much about the attitude. It's the older attitude. It's not their age group as much as it is that generation of attitude.
What they subscribe to, right?
Right.
So I can speak to it, as a Gen X, right? Is they also had a better chance at making all that money than we did.
Especially through the 20s and all the home.
Yeah, I don't know what the numbers are, but I think, they're like somewhere around the 60s to the 80s or whatever, right? We won't get clear on it, but I mean, not to go pedantic on what is baby boomer, but I believe it's something like 50 something to 70 something, right?
Yeah, 20s was a little young.
20s
I was thinking of an event where, we had a lot of the home ownership opportunities,
okay.
But that's a little far back.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That was like
you're
way
right,
back. You're right.
right.
Just kind of, bring that back. But yeah, but at the end of the day, the oil was booming at that time. There was corporations and industrial, complexes that were happening. Cars were being built. Like everybody had a chance to make a lot of money at that time. And they could just be this kind of like certain person and play the part. And they just got to make all this money and bring it home to their families, right? And I didn't get to live in that generation. And it was kind of a disorienting generation. The generation Y before me didn't get to live in that. They have millionaire parents who are like, I don't know how to make you a millionaire, son. You have to go figure this out on your own. Like, I think this is the way I did it. And then all the generations have been saying, well, the way you did it
doesn't work.
It doesn't work now, right? It was like circumstantial at the time. And I could see why it worked for you. But kind of the disillusionment of it a little bit is that you look at people in those experiences and they seem pretty convicted about who they've become. And they seem to have these strong opinions too, right? About other generations, right? And we see flaws, in your generation particularly, you're like, you don't look like you're as happy as you think. You're riding the golf cart around. You've got the $400,000 house in Florida, another little cool Connecticut house of $850,000, whatever, right? And they look like they're living a rich life, but you also don't really relate to them.
No.
Can you really sit down and have a conversation with them and feel like you guys have any alignment at all?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so there is a generational gap. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I would say that would be fair. It's very hefty, but it is fair.
It's fair, right? But you're also saying it's not about their age. You are not really attached to, oh, I'm not going to like anybody in this age group. You're saying
Right.
you've bought into an ideology that we just don't buy into anymore.
Right.
So I think that's beautiful because we all have our experience with everybody who's listening to this show right now is going to know like what that audience looks like, what the boomer audience looks like. It's been well documented. And so now we understand that this divide is real, right? Because we're having an honest father to son conversation here about what it looks like from you and your perspective and the youth, which I'd love to bring some youth to the show right now. So thank you for that.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Great. And so then it becomes, okay, how do we minimize the divide? I mean, at least consciously. So let's just assume that they have the capacity to actually change their mind. Now, I think most of us have decided they don't. Like they got to wear the same, they got their shirts they're going to put on. Their office looks the way that it looks. They've got a plaque on a wall. They've got their golf cart. They've got their fancy car. And they're not changing their mind. They're just pissed off that like the local restaurant they liked so much is not open in the pandemic, right? Like we have a low image of the boomer community, right? But now I'm curious, and I think anybody else would be curious about, what would you tell them they're so fucking wrong about?
Well, I would say going back to what you talked about, where you kind of brought in this idea that, everything was a lot easier for them and, majorly because things were in development. What I've noticed, especially in my time in the pharmacy, I was in Bonita Springs Pharmacy, Bonita Beach Road, and you get a lot.
Doing what, actually? Just tell us a story. Like you took a job as a pharmacy tech, right?
Pharmacy technician, yes. So I, with my social skills, was particularly...
Because you've done retail and things like that.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, you honed it a little bit, and now you landed yourself in like a CVS, in Florida, which is like prime time boomer.
And Bonita Springs.
Visiting playground.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Right? I mean, like they're all coming in for their prescriptions.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I felt this throughout any job, and the pharmacy just was such a high extent to it because you figure Bonita Beach Road it's a major road if you don't know in Bonita Springs, and Bonita Springs is similar to Naples, just not quite as low, where it's the higher class per se, more expensive, richer area of Florida that, a lot of them like to retire or live or have a place at. So my location just had a lot of traffic, so you just kind of get in a lot of situations. And the biggest thing I think that anybody can really relate to is when you grow up in an era where everything is starting and you're stuck in that era, it's easy to have this impression that every associate or every person at the front of a job is responsible for that establishment or is responsible for the company. And I think that's one of the biggest disconnects is, you figure you grow up, you get to a teenager, and you get all these responsibilities and you need money. It's not easy. What's available to you? When all these boomers are still working, or even just the older generation is working and you need education and you need all these things, the only way to make money is to work those entry-level retail, food industry, straight up runt of the big corporation. And what happens...
Runt of, can we just say like it's a cool word? Runt of, right?
Yeah.
The runt.
If you want to visualize that, you're that mail guy that's in that mail room that has to take all the letters and put them into the individual chutes. And I'm sure boomers can visualize that a little bit more, than a lot of these other new jobs. So you're not getting paid enough to be there. You're not even remotely in a management position. You're not remotely in a high place in the industry. But a lot of that generation that grew up where the people that they talked to were the owners, were the managers, were the people creating that business, make it that everything is the associate's problem. Every little thing they don't want to deal with, every little thing, the dirtiness is the associate's problem because they're the front of the company, they're responsible for the company. And I think that would be what I would say to kind of sit back, take a little different look at is, a lot of us are just trying to make enough money to go to school.
You think boomers would like that, right? I wonder, B, that's a great comment and great narrative there. I'm just thinking to myself, but boomers like that. I mean, they like people who work from the mailroom up. And so here they are being rude to you as if you're like you're the mailroom guy, whatever you're at, if you're trying to get them the prescription that they need for their health to live, right? And they're being assholes, basically, is what we're saying.
Right.
But boomers actually like the idea that kids are actually working and trying. So there is a dichotomy here. They are assholes, possibly at times, to young people who are actually doing exactly what they would like to see them do.
Right.
Just do the basic job, work their way up.
Well, I think that's part of the disconnect too, is that a lot of these jobs aren't a career. And maybe that's part of this different societal gap, this different generational gap, is that we are told since the beginning that we can do whatever we want. We can get educated, we can figure it out, we can get the big job that we want to do. So working your way up in a company is not at all what most of us, some of us, at least I would say a good enough of us. It's that first job. You don't have to be so hard about it.
Yeah. And this is what's lovely about, like what we try to do on the Mixed Messages podcast show is that we essentially try to continually eliminate the gap of misconception, I'd like to say. Just think misconception, misunderstanding each other can ruin, relationships in a society.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the misconception here, though, what I'm feeling out of this at the moment is that it's not much different. I mean, like you are going through the first job. My first job was Kenny Shoes, right? Or maybe that wasn't the first, but like I knew like I did paper routes. Early days, I did mowing lawns. We did lemonade stands when we were in fourth grade in my age. And so I found myself working at the movie theater, Kenny Shoes, selling shoes with a suit on, doing paper routes in the morning while going to high school. So I have this whole story of like walking uphill in the snow both ways, as working 3 jobs through high school, right? And that's Gen X. And so I think, the generations above us obviously had a much harder life through all of the concepts of life, right? But everybody had to work their first jobs. So you're just saying you're doing the same thing. So that's the first thing I'm hearing is that number one, we're not so different because you are in this generation just doing your first jobs. They're not career jobs. They're just going to help you fucking pay some bills and do some things, right? And then you have to decide to focus on your career. I think that's worth mentioning only because they think you're all lazy and doing nothing and don't care about nothing, can't have a healthy relationship, couldn't even fall in love if you want. Like you said, all hooking up with everybody without no intimacy and just losing it, the whole generation, which we've all know that people like, the Elvis generation or each generation dogs the rest.
Right.
What would you say about their rudest comments they're making about you guys? Now I'm starting to hear that there's not much different. You guys are going to go build your careers based on the timing of what is now. And you're not incapable of going out and getting some basic first starter jobs.
Right.
And you're going to work your way up. And you're going to be smart and know that this isn't like a whole career thing. I'm going to just do this starting job. Then I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. That is what every generation believes is the kind of life, the human evolution of finding your way and getting to success. So in that sense, you're no different. Boomers didn't get handed everything. They did have to do some early mowing lawn jobs. Okay, so now they're like, but you're lazy and you have no emotions and you're just video gamers and you don't care about your relationships.
What I would start with, to I guess add a little bit of background.
Please, we love background.
I like to think that this last generation, and I love the early 2000s, I love the music, the positivity. I like to think that there has been a growth of comfort. And what I mean by that is a growth of not having to really prove yourself, whether that be understanding gender norms or understanding the concept of different titles or how people feel. Or I think back then, and maybe part of why they can be so rude and why they have expectations of how we're supposed to be this front of this company, maybe the original thing wasn't even down to the core. I think it's down to the fact that a lot of them had to prove themselves.
And they couldn't come out of the closet. Or they couldn't be gender
They
balanced.
couldn't.
No. If they were going to be the CEO and have a wife, they had to have the wife, the children, make the money, and they couldn't be gay.
Right.
Or something like that.
That's true.
So that's a big difference now, right?
That's a big difference.
That's
yeah.
a huge difference, actually.
Yeah. So
I hadn't even thought about that before. Thank you.
Right. No problem. So, you come down to it then and, you figure, a lot of us are just trying to do, what we can. And a lot of us understand that these entry-level jobs aren't as important, right? Because you're coming to this new age of understanding, acceptance. You can do anything you want to do, and you're not having to prove yourself. So maybe the laziness idea or, impression comes from the fact that there's a new balance of how much do I want to slave into this? And am I actively trying to appear like I'm busy? Am I actively trying to appear like I'm upper class or, the shit, or I'm doing what I need to do? I feel like a lot of us don't. Okay, you're gay, cool. You're she, you're he, you're they, okay, anything, right? And
yeah, you don't know what you want to do right now in your life. Fine, we'll take you cross your legs, hang out, watch the sunset, and figure it out, right? Like,
yeah,
you guys have a different tempo now as a generation, right? It's like a different a momentum and a tempo. It doesn't mean you're any less ambitious. Is that fair to say?
That is absolutely fair to say, because how much of ambition needs to be constantly shared?
That's
why
fair.
do we need to show them or even tell them any of our plans or ambitions?
Fantastic.
And yeah, we struggle with addictions online and all these different ways, but they struggled with drugs in a period of time. We still struggle with drugs. They struggled with drugs. And I think the other point to answer about, what you kind of brought about with sleeping around, I think is what you inferred to a little bit.
That was a pre-conversation before the air show, right? Which is awesome.
I think you referred to it a little bit, actually.
Yeah, bring it on. I mean, everybody's like, "Oh, wow, where's this story going?"
Because you're saying all the negative things,
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, that was one of the negative
things, right?
Let's talk about it, yeah.
So I would say then, right, so you are coming into this new world where you're just a lot more comfortable, you know what you want, it's possible, you have much more self-preservation. I think a lot of us just don't feel forced into, commitment is not always marriage, and it is, but I would say that maybe a lot of us feel like, how do I know this is the right person? And we're a little bit more accepting of exploring it in an open, physically and emotionally way without rushing into creating solidified relationships. If it's the right person, then marriage will come. But in a lot of ways, maybe you can't figure out if it's right if you're not comfortable with maybe exploring things. I think a lot of us, and this might be a raunchy, I'm not sure.
Be raunchy. Yeah, go ahead.
If the vibe is there, if the feeling is there, why not pursue it? And it's not to say that everyone or one of us are like this. And we absolutely have, the people who sleep around. And so did their generation. Every generation has its group of people that sleep around. I just think they're not realizing that we're not the people that sleep around or the people that get stuck in these relationships or get married, or it's like, oh, I courted you, you're with me, this is that, it's solidified, kids.
I'm so glad you used the word courted, right? Because I was thinking that before too, right? Of courting and whatever, right?
Right.
You're right. I mean, that's what we imagine. Like, we did the courting and now you're my wife or you're my husband and now we own you and then we can be miserable forever.
Yeah. And that goes into, us understanding more comfort zones and being more sensitive to other people. Is the more of feminism, the more developments in, not feeling this ownership, you're obviously going to lose a sense of courting.
You're right. Let's talk about that for a second. Let me just take a step back because I like it. And we're going to go here, but the traditional version kind of slowed down the process of courting. So now they're saying, oh, you guys take everything so easy. You take everything so lightly. You just sleep around, right? And you're like, no, we're just being, really high evolved human beings trying to figure out whether we belong together and doing things. We're probably less reckless is what I'm hearing you say.
Right.
As many generations before you, which is a fantastic and hopeful thing to hear. And then on top of it, though, you're saying that all that courting and all that other mind fucking, I don't like use the F word very often on the show, but mind fucking that people have been doing to each other for generations. I courted you, now I've claimed you, now you're mine, and we can go down a roller coaster of bad habits and terrible lifestyle together, right? You guys are very selective about that. Now you might,
buy flowers. You still do that.
you're still romantic. You're still court. You still get butterflies, right?
Right. Absolutely.
You still get nervous on your date, maybe.
Absolutely.
You do.
Yeah. And you still want to do the best for any kind of partner, like any generation, right? There is still chivalry. That's what I say.
Man, boom. Like,
Right?
thank
Chivalry
you.
still exists, even if courting is becoming less existent. And thanks for actually sitting me back. I realized I didn't finish my point from before.
Please do now.
Is that now, rather than, as I said, where there was either sleeping around or courting, there's now sleeping around or experience. And it's hard to explain it, but the alternative is not so direct anymore. The alternative is still, I want to find the right person. I want to do it in the right way. I want to be patient. I want to make sure I'm committed, but I'm not forced into that commitment.
Why do you think all these people think you guys don't even give a shit about any of this? I think you do, but I'm curious why the world thinks that this generation is just like indifferent and doesn't even have the capacity to even talk like you're talking right now.
To tell you the truth, I think part of it is media. I think that there's a lot of older people, or even just, like companies and brands that are kind of supporting a lot of skinship. And there has always been skinship.
Skinship? What is that?
Basically, bathing suit pictures and,
Yeah.
showing a little bit more
Gotcha.
of a person's body. So there's a lot more of that in the sense of when you have it on Instagram, when you have it on the internet, and you have this world now with some exclusives that has access to internet, anybody or most people can now see those pictures, unlike a specific volume of magazines that would come out. So a lot of these older people might be going on social media and seeing all of these young people modeling and all these young people.
Everybody wearing like slutty clothes, so to speak, or
Exactly.
like acting all like rock star, as if they could just be a rock star at like the age of 18 and not care, right? Or
Right.
You're right. Like, yeah, okay, so yeah, not much different than Elvis shifting his hips, though.
You don't see old people typically on these social media platforms in their underwear. You know what I mean?
Right. So they're just like, oh, they're being reckless. They obviously have no values, is what I'm hearing. By showing so much of their skin, they must not have values.
Well, I think that it's a little bit more of an unconscious effect, actually. I don't think it's so much that they see the pictures and they think, oh, look at these young people acting this way. They must be slutty. I think it's the effect that those are all the pictures usually now, right? And even in history, if you find an old magazine, every, for the most part, picture that you see, in the bathing suit or slutty outfits is young people. So there's this subconscious attachment to slutty clothing, young people. It's not a cause and effect in the sense that they're thinking because of those photos. I just think they see it so much that it kind of just in the background etches a little bit into other opinions or other feelings. Maybe somebody had a bad experience when retail with a young person. Maybe something happened where a younger person just wasn't having a good day. That always happens, and they flipped out on them. And a lot of people use this as an insult, right? What a slut. Frick you. I'm trying not to curse, but
it's a family show, but it's good.
Right,
I've cursed a couple times this show. It's just how comfortable I am with you, but yeah.
Yeah, but so they use that insult as just an insult, right? As just a avenue of their negativity, but then they have all that background of social media and media possibly behind it. So then they start to believe it. I think that maybe that can be kind of a misconception.
That makes sense, right? Like a persona, like they're like, oh, you strike me as this thing I've thought about that you are. I've seen it on the media. You are identity A. Okay, so that's great. So I really didn't think we would go this long in this. It's my fault.
Right,
I was
my
so
apologies.
curious. No, it's not. You shouldn't apologize at all. This is totally my fault. I was so interested in this conversation. But I am interested a little bit more now that we've covered all that about what your intimate relationships look like, or your relationship, and what your motive and agendas look like. Now that we've had the conversation, we should go ahead and roll with it. And as I said, like, I thought I was going to be an opener, and I just really enjoyed it. We just get going, right? So that being said, you're in a relationship, correct?
Right.
And how long have you been in a relationship?
So I would say in a dating relationship, it has been a little bit over a year, maybe a year and a half, whichever you consider October.
Let's just say a year and a half.
Year and a half.
And you're how old?
So yeah, a year and 5 months or whatever.
Year and 5 months. And
I am 18.
18. Okay, so for everybody else who gets to feel that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like a 16 and a half year old who found his girl. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Okay, now, having grown up with you, it's weird. It's like, I kind of now, I mean, I could say this for the first time. I've never shared this with you, but it's like, it cracks me up. I kind of saw like a Back to the Future version of you, where like, as we were trying to figure out your car and what you're going to drive, you really didn't date a lot earlier on, right? Like, I mean, it surprised me because you're terribly good looking, right? But like, but you really didn't, right? And so, but then all of a sudden you're like saying, hey, Dad, I really want a relationship. Like, I would like my senior year or my end of my next high school year. You were very academic for a long time, and you really buckled down. Really proud of you for that. And you were proud of yourself for that. And you put in a ton of time to make yourself educated with what you had to work with. But then all of a sudden it was kind of like this, the Back to the Future concept is that you now have the forerunner and the hot girlfriend. Right? You know what I mean? Yeah. And Michael J. Fox had that and that, right? And I mean hot girlfriend, meaning like the coolest person and all that, right? Like you're fit, like a thing. And so like you were saying to me, look, I'm trying to figure out this car, and I definitely want like my girl. And I'm not interested in like playing the field and doing a bunch of stuff. Like you were very focused on this. And whether you knew what you were going to get or not is a different story, right? Mm-hmm. But now you're living it, right? You're driving the Forerunner. You've got the girl that you wanted. And it's a nice story, would you say?
Yeah, I guess so. As nice as a story is.
As nice as a story is, right? That's all I'm saying. And so why don't you share with us, how did you guys meet? How did you decide to even enter into this?
So an interesting thing about that kind of time is that I actually knew my girlfriend since, I believe, sophomore year. Met each other at a football game. She was actually in a relationship with my friend at the time. And what happened is we had English class together. And we just were really, really good friends in the sense that you can be, when it's a girlfriend of a friend, where we just always laughed together. Our humor kind of connected a lot. We would kind of say the same jokes. We were just laughing. We were getting in trouble all the time. And I originally never really had a physical attraction. And that was a big part probably to her being in a relationship already. And also a major part due to the fact that I didn't really know her the way I do now back then. But there was that chemistry, there was that friendship. And I think that's the biggest thing, that a little bit of reference to the disconnect of boomers and young people, or the interpretation, is that that's what we're trying to have. We're just trying to have friends. And that's where it develops in that next way. So we had a little bit of drama, junior year, kind of stopped talking, mainly because so she broke up with her boyfriend junior year. And she was over at my house one time because we were just hanging out, and, I wanted to show her my dog. We just kind of hung out at the house, and there was a little bit of a different feeling.
Callie, by the way, just had a dog, Callie.
Yeah, it was Callie, a Saluki mix, very cute dog. Yeah, there wasn't anywhere else to really go except for my room, because...
Sounds convenient.
Yeah. Right? Well, because I didn't have like a really big living room or any kind of living space, and we were just laying
at your mom's house.
At my mom's house, that's right. And we were just laying on my bed, and there's just that kind of feeling, and we weren't really sure about it. We didn't do anything. We didn't rush in anything. There was no making love right on the spot. There was none of that. Young people don't rush into it either. But that was when that first kind of spark happened. And later on, and we were in Halloween, we were with our friends, and the thing is, Natalie was a part of my friend group, because she was friends with my friend, and, it's just one of those kind of groups all together. And especially when she was single, because that lasted for about a year, everyone in the friend group liked her because she was like the one girl, You know, she was tall, she was pretty, you know, she had a good vibe, she was funny, you know, so everybody liked her. And what happened is we ended up, you know, having our first kiss, which was way after the bedroom thing, but it was on Halloween. And it just made things really dramatic in the friend group.
First kiss dramatic. Oh, in the
friend group.
Wow. Yeah. Tell us more.
Because everybody liked her, right? And we weren't on Halloween by ourselves.
Yeah, why do you get to have her? Like, she's like a
Well,
shared...
we weren't on Halloween by ourselves. We were with the friend group. So we kind of went out for a minute. And I think that helped it too, is like, you know, why are you doing this when you're, you know, with us? And then exactly why do you get to have her? Blah, 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 blah. You know, at the time, you know, sometimes you don't really know where to take that because that's such, you know, a complicated thing. So my first response was, I'm not going to talk about it, you know, which,
like,
you
leave
know,
it alone. Like, mind your business.
I mean, like, not talk about the awkwardness. I was going to kind of shy away from pursuing anything because of all the drama of the friend group.
So you withdrew. You were like,
I
wow,
withdrew.
That created a whole bunch of drama.
Right.
Totally unnecessary. We're a friend group. We have loyalty to this friend group. I mean, maybe we crossed the boundaries. I don't know, right? So I
didn't know what to do.
Okay,
right.
Wow.
And that, you know, kind of hurt her feelings a little bit, you know? So she kind of distanced herself because I had distanced myself, you know, and we hadn't been fully together yet. You know, it was that first kind of beginning of even anything past friends, you know, any kind of physical attraction.
Wow. So first kiss equaled like blowout drama and withdraw.
In the friend group, unfortunately. Yeah.
And so in your relationship too, right? Like, I mean,
actually, yeah,
right?
Definitely.
It wasn't like first kiss and then every nice date after, right? Like, now
right.
Okay. Yeah. So carry on.
So what ended up happening is we didn't talk. We kind of fell apart. And I remember this one time I was having a lot of trouble with my car. I think it was the cylinders, some having to do with that. And basically it was just having trouble driving. I make this desperation drop off at this local car center, not a brand deal or anything, but it was called Tuffy's. I can't vouch for every chain, but definitely the area did me really well. I was really appreciative of that. And so I remember coming back kind of stressed out because I knew it was going to cost a lot. You know, it sucked having to bring it there, you know, sucked having to deal with that. And I'm walking back, and for some reason, I just get this like anxiety of I'm going to lose that friendship, right? I'm going to lose, you know, who's my girlfriend now. It was crazy because you would think that when we distanced ourselves, I already felt like I lost her. But it wasn't until that specific day. So what happened is I called her, you know, I apologized, you know, and she was pretty upset. You know, she had a little bit of a, what are you doing? You know, and that was a big part because at the time.
But you had an epiphany though. I want you to go on that backstory, but I think it's awesome that you just shared this epiphany.
Right.
Like while your car's in the shop or something, right? Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah. I had this I gotta call her for whatever reason. So I did. I was able to somehow save it. We talked a little bit. We started hanging out again. You know, it wasn't until a little after that, you know, she came over to my house again. And, you know, I also want to note that the second time was even better because the second time we were Skyping, you know, we were conversing. It was like after you get past that first hill, it was this constant conversation, you know, all good vibes. There was no friend drama. It was almost this reset. And she comes over to my house. And again, you know, we're hanging out, we're having a great time. And then we happened to kiss. And what ended up being complicated about it, actually, was that after the kiss, when we had the conversation of, so what are we? I told her.
You brought that up, right? Just for clarity.
Right. I did. I told her that at the moment, I didn't see myself with her in the future. And I felt bad about it.
You shared this with me a little bit earlier. Yeah, it's so funny seeing you guys now, the fact that you had felt that way. But any of us could relate to this where we're like, well, we don't know what we're getting into. We don't know what model we want. We know you're awesome, but like, I'm supposed to like look like this, or like, these are just like these kind of judgments that also we have taken on about us. Right? Like, and so, yeah, that was hilarious. Of course, again, now you like double down. You fucked up the first kiss.
I'm a dick.
Now you
what
fuck
can
up
I say?
the,
I'm not a nice guy, I guess.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Now you mess up the next freaking awesomeness, right? You're like,
right.
Okay, keep going. We love this. Yeah.
It was because
the nightmare. What is up? You're overthinking everything, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. Maybe not. Yeah.
And I told her though, I said, and at first she was really mad, she wanted to leave, there was drama. But when I explained it to her more, I explained to her that I was in a place, and partly because I wanted to really find someone senior year, because I felt like it was my time.
This is what I was saying about like your vision. Like you were like, I need the perfect car. I don't know what it is yet. Turned out to be a 4Runner, right?
Right.
And I need the perfect girlfriend.
Right.
And I need my life to just like show up for me, right? For all the difficulties you've had to go through with your mom and I and everything, you get to have that, right? Like your life had its own challenges, and you were just like, I want it my way. And you're strong enough of a character to kind of pick it, I guess.
I think a part of it was actually from my brother, because senior year was his big cool year of when he really got into his own skin. He got his car, he got these earrings, he had his moment.
Letterman jackets, everything, like out of nowhere, right? Yeah.
And over the years, any brother will always feel some sort of shadow when something big happens. And I just really felt, after all the years, the baby younger brother, I just really felt like I was ready for it to be my time. My time to shine. And it wasn't so much that I felt like I deserved.
Almost yearbook, right? Like you get your best yearbook, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But, it wasn't so much that I felt like I deserved it or that I was entitled to it. I just felt like I wanted to have my, my moment.
That's awesome. So now you're like the second moment where you got to kiss, and it's like, what are we now?
Right. So then I'm explaining to her in my seriousness of my moment, so my person.
Oh, you're not. Yeah, I don't think you're my moment, is what you said, right?
Well, I basically said that I want to be fully committed. I want to be lifelong, truly and deeply committed. And that I wasn't saying that I didn't want to be with you.
Right.
I was saying that I wanted, and this was what broke the barrier, I feel like, which was what really brought us into a lot of the positive relationship that we're in, and what also breaks the barrier between what we talked about of the different generations is that I wanted to be friends who were physically and emotionally okay with each other. Not friends with benefits, not friends that, sleep with other people. We were actually fairly exclusive. But if I was to be truly, truly committed, we agreed that we were going to be somewhat exclusive, but we also agreed that we would converse with each other and be real with each other if that other person came. And that's where kind of the agreement was, and where she accepted it more, was that it wasn't about friends with benefits, have the benefits, but not the commitment, and then, sleep with other people.
We weren't just passing time.
Right. It was, I don't want to break your heart if the right person comes.
And there's that too.
I don't want to get into a relationship, right, and not be so committed, if somebody else comes that I feel like I want to be committed to. So that was kind of actually a couple months before I asked her out.
It's very honest of you. Is that fair to say? I mean, like,
yeah, it was very honest. I really was real with her, and that's, such a huge thing in any relationship, right?
Right.
As much as, it makes it hard or complicated or weird or, even misconceptions or misunderstandings, it broke the barrier though for A, how honest we were with each other, and B, getting to what's real, right? Not taking things as friends who are physically and emotionally, okay with each other, but explaining the deeper meaning to it. And that broke the barrier to our relationship, because while we were friends who were physically and emotionally okay with each other, not even that we did a lot of physical things in the beginning.
You really did court, actually. You didn't hurry into all that.
Right.
Right. You didn't go, oh, I'm sure we have chemistry and we should just have awesome, quick sex. You didn't.
Yeah. And it was actually good. She will tell you the first time was actually good, which is, crazy,
That's cool.
compared to all the stories you hear,
stories, right? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But, so we took that, and we have always, in a sense, acknowledged that, and we've honored that. We've always been able to figure out the misunderstandings, express why we're upset, what we're upset about, and really get to what the heart means.
And that happened, this first conversation happened at 16 years old.
Right.
Just to put it in context. And you're 18 now.
Right.
Natalie is how old?
She is 19. She
19.
is 6 months
Yeah,
older.
a little older. Yeah.
A little older.
You're taller. She's a little older.
Yeah.
You guys get to do your thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for our audience there, everybody, come on. I mean, like, we kind of talked about the gap. We talked about, this whole range that's existing here and this conflict about, like, are the younger people doing what we think they should be doing? Do they care about things? Do they care about each other? Are they checking out? And what we just heard from my son in today's show, and I'm really so stoked that you share this with us, is that, no, these were very deeply mindful conversations in the development of a new relationship in high school that didn't necessarily need to be, but they became that because that was your core, that was your ethic, that was your moral, and that's what you wanted, and you had destiny in mind and all this stuff. And you were able to be a relationship who started to go, well, I trust your honesty. I respect that, and let's make some agreements. I guess it kind of sucks if, like, we start to fall for each other and then your perfect guy comes along, your perfect girl, but we'd rather choose that than just play flakes and pretend like we like each other and just be casual, right?
Right.
Let's dive in and be the best for each other.
Right.
And see what that comes.
We were always serious.
Right? We were serious, right? You were always serious, right? And so I think so much of what came out of this conversation is actually how evolved, because these are the kind of conversations that many generations, including mine, probably didn't get to till they were like 27, 28. And so now it just seems to keep getting more evolved, where, like, you're having these conversations at 16, and now you're having these conversations and now you're living this life at 18, where you're in a really healthy and happy relationship, and that there's the whole world out there, and nothing's guaranteed, but you're in it.
And it's real. It's committed.
It's real and it's committed. Exactly.
And I want to add as well, when we got to that breakthrough, and the reason why I call it a breakthrough for anybody who has any chance of maybe implementing that in future scenarios is, people say that negative things or bad things to happen are what gets you to really see a person, what gets you to really figure out how they act, figure out who they are. And that's not so much the situation when you think that an issue is not something bad. An issue is something to either figure out or to discuss, to to look at. And I just want to add that it was the breakthrough that made me fall in love with her, that made me committed, because since then, that was when she really opened up to me. And that was when I really opened up to her. And then through all the early on little arguments, and which weren't really ever arguments, they were just issues. Or they were arguments, but they weren't bad. That's just kind of what I'm trying to express, is that you have to get deep. It's not always sunshine and rainbows. It's not always perfect, but that's not a bad thing. And it's when you go through that, not necessarily when you have a hurricane together, but when you go through that side that a lot of people avoid, that's when you meet each other.
Through breakdown comes breakthrough. And I think that's true. So we are almost out of time here. It's been an amazing show. I think we're going to reconvene on this, right, with you and Natalie.
Absolutely.
And we're going to do another one with Natalie, so we get to hear her side of the story, right? And then, of course, you and I can have many more conversations. Would you mind just doing a last little summary and take us out of the show?
Yeah, of course. So first, I like to add that at the end of the day, a philosophy that I like to live by is that it's not what people say that you follow. It's the perspective that they give you that you make your own and execute in your own lives. So anything I say, anything I approach, obviously to my own positive way or my own negative way, it is my opinion. And, hopefully it's a good opinion, but I just want to add that. I'd also like to say, going into the relationship part, one thing that I really kind of learned is, so my father has talked a lot, in his own way about it's complicated. And that's mostly part of the gap a little bit. It's not as big as with the boomers, but it's still a little bit of a gap in the sense that Gen X has dealt with a lot of complicated things. They've dealt with their own sense of society not being as accepting through their lifetime. And what I mean to add is that, so they see it as complicated, and that's okay. But for us, when we're earlier on, sometimes we kind of take a more simple approach.
Yeah, it's not complicated.
It's not complicated. It's simple. We're living, we're trying to be the best that we can. We're trying to do the best that we can. And in any relationship, in any life, everybody always talks about a balance. That's part of it too. There's the parts where you get complicated and you get deep and you talk about your issues and you learn who they are. And then you take that and together you'll learn where you can kind of feel okay with now it's simple. We did that, that's that. It doesn't always have to be a constant self-examination. That's one thing, I want to add. And the other thing is that boomer is never an insult. The whole okay boomer has never been an insult. It's rather a way of, so let's say you're dealing with this generation, mad all the time in retail, mad all the time, towards you. To me, this was the first way that we could truly respond because it was always, I'm sorry, I'll go get my manager, whatever, because you figure you're young, you're sensitive, they're using all these mind ways to make you feel like a terrible person sometimes, and it hurts your feelings. So your natural response is, I'm sorry. But okay, boomer was the first time of not having to say, I listened to you.
It's almost like an anti-bullying campaign.
Kind of, and it's not so much trying to point out that, I listened to you or I took what you said, but it's a response of, okay, boomer.
I understand your approach.
Well,
right?
yeah, it's like,
I'm not going
okay,
to take it
boomer.
personal anymore. You're a boomer, right? Like, of course you're going to be a dick right now.
Well,
this doesn't make me a bad person. I don't have to be right. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm like hanging on a thread on this. Yeah, carry your thought. Sorry.
I just mean it's a way of a defense mechanism. It's not so much about giving them leeway or understanding them, which is another part. Both sides need to understand.
Typically,
yeah, diffusing. It's like,
right?
okay, you said your piece, boomer.
Got it.
Right? That's what I mean. Like,
Wow.
okay, boomer.
Okay. I feel so like that's it.
That
guys.
makes sense,
That's
right?
the wrap,
Okay.
right? Because we needed it. I was curious. Michelle was just telling me like there's an okay boomer thing going on. And I was like,
right.
I didn't know that.
It's like we get so much shit from you, know, no more shit. Okay,
no
boomer.
More shit. Okay,
keep
boomer.
saying the same
it's
thing.
All good. We got
okay,
you.
boomer,
We're
right?
good.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
You said it.
You see what I mean, right?
I see it now, clear as day. And I feel more present in the humanity of the world. Thank you, son, for joining me on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me. And for any of the listeners, I hope that I explained the best, and I hope that you take it in your own natural way, and that if it helps your future at all, then, good for you.
It's a beautiful contribution.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right. Ciao. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Mixed messages. Well, Michael, I want to keep this conversation going. We're going to have to close this one out for this podcast because we're almost out of time, but we'll come right back to this in part 2 because nobody wants this podcast to end. How are you feeling about the podcast so far?
Well, I definitely feel like we approached some great topics. I feel like I got a little bit more to say, and I'd be glad to come back and talk a little bit more about everything.
I love that. Okay, we're going to come right back, guys. Tune right back in part 2. And by the way, Natalie is here with us in the house. It's awesome. So we just want you to hear her voice. Natalie, come in. Say something.
Hey, everyone. Can't wait to see you in part 2. Will you get to hear a little bit from me, too?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So we're going to bring Natalie back. Actually, part 2, we're going to just do the same podcast, but we went long. But then we're going to bring part 3, I think, with you, right? Yeah. And then we're going to do one just with you.
Ooh, that's exciting, isn't it?
Isn't it? I think so. And we all got to experience the first kiss. Do you want to say anything about the first kiss and the second kiss? You want to save that for the podcast?
We'll save that for part 3, won't we?
That sounds fantastic. All right. So now you hear all of us here together. Happy holidays, everybody. This is a beautiful celebration of our whole New Year's, and we're happy to share this with you. All right. Cool. We'll be back. Mixed messages. Mixed messages. Mixed messages. Mixed messages. Mixed messages.